Welcome all participants to this series of AI masterclasses. These will be 4 sessions over the next few weeks, which you can join. And there will be a certificate for those who complete all 4 sessions, certificate of participation. We have a number of partners with us in this series, including Belmont University today, and later we have Google and Singapore City, Shanghai City, and Seeds and others. So we look forward to bringing you this cutting edge webinar series and in the form of a masterclass so that you can apply these tools in your day-to-day work. So as we progress, let me just introduce the SRSG, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for DRR, Mr. Kamal Kishore, who will be giving a short address to you. And after that, we'll hand over to Mr. Jeff Donahoo of the Belmont University, which will be leading the session for today. So first, let's start with the address of the SRSG.
Colleagues, distinguished participants, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to this masterclass series on leveraging artificial intelligence for disaster risk reduction. I would like to start by thanking our partners, Belmont University, Shanghai Meteorological Service, Google, the Singapore Civil Defense Force, Seeds India, and all the experts who will be joining us over the coming weeks, as well as all of you who have taken time to participate in this very important and timely event. Artificial intelligence is transforming every sector of our societies and economies. For disaster risk reduction, its potential is enormous. It can help us strengthen multi-hazard early warning systems. It can help us enhance urban resilience. It can help improve and make possible more rapid risk assessment and also enable effective response after disasters. Used wisely, AI can help us accelerate progress towards the goals of the Sendai Framework in the remaining 5 years of Sendai Framework. And in doing so, we will also contribute to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. But I have to emphasize that with this opportunity comes responsibility. As governments and institutions, we must ensure that the use of AI in disaster risk reduction is ethical, inclusive, and equitable. We must guard against new risks, whether technical, social, or ethical, even as we harness innovation to save lives and protect communities. This masterclass series is an important step in that journey, and I'm grateful to our Global Education and Training Institute for developing this. Over the next 4 sessions, you will hear from leading experts, examine real-world applications, and discuss the principles that must guide us as we integrate artificial intelligence into our disaster risk reduction efforts. I hope that this knowledge will not only inspire you, but also equip you with practical insights that can be applied in your own work. I wish you an engaging and productive time, and I look forward to the ideas and innovations that will emerge from these conversations. Together, let us harness artificial intelligence to not only do more, but also do better. All for a safer, more resilient world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal Kishore. And as we hand over to Belmont University and their team for the next part of the session, let me just remind you all that all the material will be shared. Even if you do miss a session, it will be recorded, it will be available. And also, we'll share the link with you in the chat where you can download the materials for these sessions. And so with that, let me hand over to Jeff Donahoo from Belmont University. Jeff, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, it's wonderful to meet everybody. I am Jeff Donahoo. I am a professor of computer science here at Belmont University in Tennessee in the States. I'm also the executive director of the Belmont Data and AI Collaborative here at Belmont University. And it really is a privilege for me to talk to all of you about a subject that I am passionate about, which is artificial intelligence. And I really want to convey to you how I believe that artificial intelligence can be your digital ally. So one of the things that I want to explore today is how can you really embrace artificial intelligence as something that you can use in your everyday personal life, as well as your professional life, to deal with some of the really important crises that all of you are facing in disaster risk reduction. So our time is somewhat limited, so I really want to give these items as starting points for your own learning. So I strongly encourage you to write some of these down and go do your own research, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that later. And I'll even encourage you to use artificial intelligence to teach yourself about artificial intelligence. So as I mentioned, I see artificial intelligence as your digital ally. A lot of people are concerned about artificial intelligence. They decide that they want to ignore AI and engage in sort of a humans only solution. Some people think of it simply as just a tool. It's something that you put to the side and you engage with every once in a while. And I think that people really miss the potential of artificial intelligence when they do that, when they treat it as something that is just a tool instead of something that they can use to engage in their everyday life. And I want to talk about just some of the places you can use it as your own digital ally. So one is in personal learning. You can actually turn artificial intelligence into your own customized teacher. You can ask it your own customized questions, and you can have it lead patiently to take you through all of the things that you're trying to figure out on whatever topic it is, and including artificial intelligence. You can take some of the things that you have to deal with in your everyday life, such as summarization, drafting emails, etc., and you can relegate that to artificial intelligence. You can use artificial intelligence to do that. You can also use it in this ally as an ideation and discussion platform. So you can bring it up and you can talk about some of the ideas that you have. It will help you identify things that you've missed. And you can even use it to explore different perspectives. You can ask it to disagree with your ideas and present counter arguments. And then you can use it for more advanced capabilities like automation and agentic AI. And we'll talk about those a little later, where you can use artificial intelligence to automate portions of your life and even take responsibility for portions of your life, both your personal life and your industry life. So just lots of capabilities that are out there in artificial intelligence. And so let's just talk about some terminology. A lot of times, there's just all sorts of terms that you hear tossed around, and it's hard to figure out which ones are important and which ones are not. And so what I wanted to do was start with just giving you some key terms and their definitions. And I'm keeping the definitions relatively simple, but again, I encourage you to write some of these things down and go look into it yourself. So the first is just, what is artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence, this is my definition. This is just some system that can perform some task, and the sum here is really important. It's not that it can perform all tasks. It's not that it can perform any task. It's just there are some tasks that it is capable of performing. And these are tasks that normally we might think of as requiring human intelligence. So it can do some really interesting things, but a lot of times these things are focused on one particular area. maybe the thing you've seen in science fiction or the thing that everybody's worried about, which is definitely a legitimate concern, and we'll talk about this a little later on in the presentation, is what is called AGI, or artificial general intelligence. People are working toward this goal of artificial general intelligence. And what is it? It is that AI system that can match or exceed the capabilities of humans on almost any task. So again, AI is usually, the tools that we see today are usually focused on very specific tasks that we can use them for. We have to figure out what those tasks are and how we use them in our daily lives. AGI is right now, an imagined capability where AI can pretty much do anything that a human can do on any task, and maybe even exceed the capabilities of humans. As far as I know, we have not achieved AGI, but this is something that lots of companies are driving toward. But even if a system can only accomplish some task or a few tasks, it can still be incredibly useful. So the AI that you've seen is what's called narrow AI. That is, it solves just a small number of tasks, but it can really solve those tasks well, which makes it incredibly useful. Some other terms you might think about are machine learning and deep learning. And for those tasks, you should just Google what those are to see how you might integrate those in your solutions. So what can AI do? What are some of the capabilities that I might rely upon in my daily work? So one is image processing. So I might have images that are collected from satellites or from drones, and I might want to use computer vision to detect what is in those images. Another thing you might use it for is sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis, is this feedback that I'm getting, is it happy? Is it sad? Are they angry? Another is theme extraction. If you conduct a set of surveys and you're trying to figure out what are people focused on, you might be looking for themes within that feedback. And AI is actually very capable of extracting those themes, right? People are really focused on where they're going to get water, or people are really focused on where they're going to get shelter. Another example is classification. So classification is this email about this particular topic, or is it about a different topic? Prediction is another piece. What do we believe is going to happen in the future based on the evidence that we currently have? And another big one is anomaly detection. In anomaly detection, it's trying to figure out whether this thing that's happening is somehow different than what is normal. So you might look at, is this email, in cybersecurity, an example is this email a legitimate email, or is it some form of phishing email? And one of the new ones that everyone is focused on now is what's called generative AI. And we'll talk about generative AI, and that's going to be where we focus a lot of our efforts today. But I just want you to be aware that there are lots of capabilities that AI has. And even though today we won't talk about things like theme extraction, now that you know about this as an AI capability, I encourage you to go see how you could apply theme extraction to whatever task that you're working on where it's applicable. But we are going to focus today on generative AI. This is sort of the thing that everybody is focused on. And so what we want to do is try to figure out, how can we dig in to generative AI and use it for our everyday tasks? So what is generative AI? And you've probably heard a lot of talk about large language models. We'll talk about those. So what is generative AI? Generative AI, it's actually a pretty good term. It's really focused on being able to produce content like text, images, audio, video, etc., that are based on patterns derived from training data. So this training data piece is extremely important, and we're going to talk about it a little later, because the training data that's used in artificial intelligence really does impact what it can generate. So how does generative AI work? most of you have, or many of you have probably already used it. But basically, you go to some generative AI system and you can see some examples at the bottom, but there are lots of systems that are out there. And you can submit a prompt, make a request, and you can get a response. And these days, one of the most popular forms of generative AI is what's called a large language model. And this is really exactly what it sounds like. It is built around language. It is trained on a large amount of data. And it's really a model for taking the patterns derived from previous data and predicting the response that you would want. Write an email in response to an email that I just received. And we'll talk about several other examples. So how do I get generative AI to give me a response? Well, I need to give it a prompt. So a prompt is really a request to the artificial intelligence to produce some particular result. And, I could ask the question, what is the answer ? And that's the only part of the prompt. And I'm probably not going to get an incredibly effective response, right? Just like you, if somebody just said, what is the answer? You wouldn't know the answer. AI is not going to know the answer either. So let's talk about some ways that you can improve that request that you make to this generative AI so that you get the response that you really want. So the first is give a goal. Be specific about what you want to receive from the artificial intelligence. So you might start your prompt with explain how to, explain how to repair my car, explain how to build a map of water sources, explain how to, and so think about the goals that you want to accomplish and be specific about those goals. Just like when you're talking to an expert, the more specific you are, the better answer you're going to get. And then the second thing is give a format. So give a target for what you want. Is it a report? Is it a presentation? Is it an email? Be specific in that prompt. So specify a goal. Explain how to, build a map. I want this map to be, drawn in this particular way of this particular part of the world. The next is length. So if you're asking it to write a response, make sure that you give it a scope. Sometimes you want a quick response in an email. Sometimes you want a detailed explanation of what's being provided. So make sure that you are clear on the scope that you are given, that you're given to the AI. For instance, you might say, give me a bulleted list of 5 items. You might say, write 3 paragraphs. You might say, give a 20-page presentation. And then the next is, if you have them and you want that kind of control, then give examples. So you might say, give me a list of products and I want the name, price, and why should I buy this particular product? Or what is the best and worst review of this product? By giving examples, you're really prompting the AI with what it is that you are targeting. And so the more information you can give, including examples, then it will write its response in the context of those examples. So just continuing on with prompt engineering, and again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to help the artificial intelligence understand what sort of results we want. So the next thing to think about is, what are your requirements, right? So you might say, write it for a beginner or write it for someone where this is a second language, or write it for an expert. So give your specific requirements. Tell it what the form is that you want. And then another powerful mechanism that you can use is specifying the role of the person. And I put person in quotes because this is I'm telling the AI, you are a physician and you are trying to diagnose a problem. And so if you think about these things, goals, requirements, role, examples, etc., you can really encourage or help the artificial intelligence, just like you would help someone else give you the best answer that it can. And one other thing to remember with prompting is that prompting is just a conversation. So if the answer that you get is not exactly the answer that you want, there are a couple of things that you can do. One is you can try to revise the prompt. The other is you can simply give it hints as if you were having a conversation with the person that you're requesting this information from. You can give them hints, right? You might say, well, this is fine, but I would like for you to emphasize, this instead of that. Or please rewrite this for a more formal audience. Or make it shorter, make it longer, or add a paragraph about this, or make sure that your conclusions really focus on. And then the artificial intelligence will take the prompt that you gave before, look at its response, and then look at your feedback, the hints that you've given it, and it will attempt to rewrite its answer. And you can do this back and forth, this conversation with the artificial intelligence multiple times. So a lot of times I will see people, they type in the prompt, they don't get the answer that they want, and then they just try to set a new prompt and revise the prompt, which is one approach. But a lot of times it's so close, and really all they need to do is figure out how to give the artificial intelligence an additional hint, and it will fix whatever the problem is that they're concerned about. So in addition, most of the stuff that we've been talking about thus far is text responses. I ask the AI a question, it gives me some sort of textual response, but most models these days are what are called multimodal. So multimodal means that it can answer in one mode, text, but it can also answer in other modes like audio, images, video, etc. So you can ask AI to summarize your text. Maybe that's a text summary. To analyze your text, maybe that's an audio analysis about what it saw with the text, with the text. Or you can ask it to visualize, and you can do this with your own data. So you can give the artificial intelligence your data, and you can ask it, give me a text summary, give me an audio analysis, and give me a visualization to help me understand the data that I'm looking at. So you can see down in the bottom corner, these are the top 5 counties with the highest rates of obesity. This was generated by artificial intelligence, and it was given public data about obesity rates for different counties and asked to generate a bar chart. And notice it can do that actually very well. So it's not limited just to text. When you're giving it your own data, a couple of things to think about. First, you may need to clean the data. So you may need to remove duplicates and irrelevant data. Remember that the artificial intelligence is trying to figure out what exactly you're asking, and the duplicates or irrelevant data is going to just give it something else that it has to think about, and it may end up focusing on the wrong thing. Use consistent formatting. Always use Celsius instead of Fahrenheit. Make your measurements consistent. Fix any inconsistencies, any disagreements within the data. Maybe you put the word male one place and you put an M other places. Try to fix those inconsistencies so it's all represented the same way. And then make sure that you standardize empty or missing data. When data isn't available, figure out for all of your data, for particular data items, what do I do about that empty data? What do I do about that missing data that helps the artificial intelligence be able to understand what I'm asking for and what the data is? The other thing is, think about how your data is structured. So organize your data in a way that's easy for AI to understand. And AI is not something completely different, right? It's trained on human data. So the more you make it understandable to a person, the more you will make it understandable to artificial intelligence. One of the things that you can do is if you have a table, instead of just giving it the table of data and have it try to figure out what the data is, you can add headers at the top of each column of the table. You can give a data dictionary along with those columns that explains what each column actually represents and how it's measured. So this is called metadata. So the more structure and information you can give about the data after you've cleaned it. Now, the next thing is make sure that you remove or anonymize any sensitive data. Remember that AI companies may be able to use anything you give them to train their model, to sell to advertisers, etc. So you need to understand what are the limitations on what they can do, and you also need to think about how you can anonymize that data, right? It may not be important that their first and last name are there. It may just be, person one, person two. That's sufficient for the analysis that you need. So make sure to remove or anonymize any sensitive data. And just so you know, if the AI companies use your data that you submit to train their model, other people can trick the model into outputting the training data. So there are well-known techniques for, well, I know it was trained on this particular data, and I know that this particular person was in that data set. There are techniques for trying to trick the model into giving information about specific items within the data. So even if the company won't share your information, it may be extractable from the model. So, when in doubt, remove or anonymize. You can also contract special agreements with companies called Enterprise Data Protection, or EDP. And this is where companies agree to not keep or use your data. So if you truly have sensitive data or you're worried about it, then you might enter into a contractual relationship with a particular AI provider that limits what they can do. But just the key thing here is to be aware of the policies of the AI systems that you're using, and they may have all sorts of rights to use whatever data, whatever prompts you give them, and be aware of what that agreement is, what the local laws are that apply, and maybe consider engaging in an enterprise data protection agreement so that the company you have to trust the company to implement this, but at least if it's a reputable company, and then they're saying, we won't use your data. We won't even use it for training or any other, we won't sell it. So the great thing about AI is you can use it to work with your data. And of course, the threat here is that companies may do something with it. So just make sure you're mindful before you upload. Sort of the thing to think about is once you upload, it's out of your control. So the next thing I want to talk about is context engineering. So a good prompt is just the beginning. There's much more that the AI can be given to try to help answer your problem. So the example that I always give is you wouldn't go to your physician and say, how can I fix my problem? You would explain what symptoms you're having. You would provide data. I felt like this yesterday. I feel like this today. And you would make a specific request. How do I get, how do I get rid of my headaches, or my foot is hurt? How do I make it better? And just like with your physician, context matters. So the more information you give, the more artificial intelligence can help. And the prompt is just a small part of the context. So other context sources are long and short-term memory. So in long-term memory, these are things that you can tell the AI about yourself. You can go into most of these artificial intelligence systems and you can say, my favorite color is, the city I live in is, whatever information. Again, be aware that any information you give it is controlled by the AI company. So I wouldn't give it, your full date of birth. Maybe you could give it your birth month. But long-term memory is really remembering about previous conversations, and it's about all the hints that you give. And I encourage you, for all of these AI systems, go in and give it information. Always want things written in an informal way, or you always want things written in a very professional way, right? These are sort of long-term memory hints. And you can even tell the AI to remember things about you. Short-term memory is really about the conversation that we're currently having. It's basically the prompts and the responses that have occurred thus far for this particular conversation. And then the other is some sort of knowledge base. You might pull from a set of documents. You might pull from, a tabular data that you've uploaded to the AI. And then the other thing, when you're thinking about context, is tools. There are lots of tools that are associated with these generative AI systems. And you can bring these various tools in. You can tell it, use this tool when you're doing this, and it might generate a particular trained perspective that's beyond what you would get just with a prompt. And so the thing here, prompt engineering is the beginning, but a prompt is just part of it. Really, you need to be thinking about how you generate that context to always get as close to the answer as you want as you can possibly get. So, tell the model about what your home city it is. Tell it about the way you want it to respond. So the next thing is we can go a step beyond this and you do automation and agentic AI. So, the examples we talked about thus far, and maybe one that you played with a lot, is you give it a response, and you give it a prompt, it gives you a response, you give it some feedback, it gives you a response, and you go from there. But maybe what you want to do is engage in automation. Maybe there's, for me, I would love to get in every morning and the AI has already answered most of my email. Or maybe it's created a draft of my email. Or maybe it's gone and gathered information based on the request in an email that will allow me to write an effective response. So there's sort of two ways that you can do this. One is automation. And here, what the steps are, and you're just going to use artificial intelligence to execute those steps. And sometimes the AI may help those steps make a decision. This email seems like it's really happy. And so I may respond a different way, right? I may add a joke in or something fun. This email seems really angry. Maybe I need to send a copy of the response to my manager to make sure that they're aware of this conversation. So here, the steps of the process are already known by you, and really you're just using AI to make decisions like happy or angry email, etc. A step beyond that is what's called agentic AI. And in agentic AI, this is a system that, given some goal, can plan and execute a multi-step task. So what this means is, instead of just limiting it to whatever task, whatever steps you've already defined, here what you do is, instead of telling it how to do it, you just give it a goal. Here's the thing I want you to accomplish. And the AI can actually plan the response and execute a multi-step task. And so the nice thing about this is it will carry out these functions for you. And in automation, you're telling it how to do it, but you're using AI to make decisions. In agentic AI, you're just stating a goal, right? I'd like all my customers to have great support. I'd like for you to answer their emails quickly, and some other guidelines with your context engineering. Of course, automation and agentic AI, these are potentially dangerous technologies. So make sure that you think about guardrails. These are constraints on a system to make sure that it operates within specified bounds, right? It never gives out sensitive company information, or whatever the guardrails are, right? It never discusses this particular topic. If you had a chat bot, you might say it will never, if someone brings up the issue of suicide, it's not going to engage in that discussion, and it's just going to give them recommendations where they might get help. And one of the places where this agentic AI is really emerging is in browsers. So I encourage you all to look at AI browsers. Now, The browser you have using, and almost certainly, or that most people are using, is very limited. It does what it says it does. You can just browse. So you have to determine what's relevant. You have to dig through advertisements. You have to not get distracted. But AI browsers are going to move toward that agentic space of, say, make dinner plans for the next 5 nights, figure out what ingredients need to be ordered and add them to my order and order the ingredients so they show up at my house. So there are a range of AI browsers that are out there. Perplexity has a browser called Comet. There's Dia and Fellow, that's Fellow with a U. These are all AI browsers that are really going a next step beyond the normal browser. And then, of course, with artificial intelligence, there are benefits. I hope that, I've given you at least some of those, but there are significant risks. The more it summarizes for you, the more it acts on your behalf, the higher the risk. And part of the risk is that AI is trained on data from humans, so it may be biased, it may be flawed. It can even hallucinate, it can just make up answers. And so the consequences, if you just use AI and you're not thinking about guardrails and you're not thinking about what AI you're using, how it was trained, you could get incorrect or biased results that cause harm. So one of the things I'd like to encourage you all to think about is accountability. And accountability really starts with the very simple question of where and why am I using AI? And it evolves from there all the way through risk analysis and risk mitigation, leading up to the point of responsible and ethical AI, where you figure out what are the first principles of my organization and how do I enforce that within artificial intelligence. So the thing that I really want you to take away from this is embrace and experiment with artificial intelligence. I know every day there's just tons of announcements about this new AI feature and that new AI feature and that new system and the other new system. And really, even I am overwhelmed by it at times. But what I encourage you to do is first just embrace AI. Try to look at the world, at least for a week, through an AI lens. Think about AI as solutions to your everyday problems and just continuously explore where AI can add value to your life. And the next thing is experiment. Sometimes a lot of people are afraid of using artificial intelligence. What if I make a mistake? But a lot of times that you're just using it personally. You're just trying to use it to solve something in your personal life, something at your job. So experiment with AI. Most of these services are free or have fairly nominal cost. So it's easy to experiment and see what happens. You might discover a great solution. And even if you don't, there's just very little to lose if it doesn't give you the answer that you expect. Now, the caveat with that is you must take responsibility for what artificial intelligence provides. You must ultimately the answers, the contents of that email, the contents of that report, the bar chart that's generated, all of these are your responsibilities. Resist the temptation to blame artificial intelligence and make sure that you have a process where you validate and verify everything that's going on with the results that you present to the world from artificial intelligence. It is an ally that you can use every day, but you are ultimately the one that's sending the email. You are ultimately the one that is providing the bar graph, providing the data. So I really have enjoyed getting to discuss artificial intelligence. Obviously, it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. And I just wish you all the best in your experimentation with artificial intelligence and your application of it to disaster relief and recovery. So with that, I will take some questions. All right. So I just want to address a few of the questions that were brought up. One of the questions was talking about recommendations on particular types of artificial intelligence that might be used for disaster risk reduction. And here it kind of depends on what the capabilities are that you have. For instance, if you have satellite data, you might use computer vision to figure out what to figure out what is going on. Like let's say it's a flood, and you want to figure out what areas are flooded, or maybe it's a fire, and you want to use predictive artificial intelligence to figure out where is the fire going to go, and where can I position resources, and where can I move personnel so that they can fight the fire effectively, but they don't put themselves in danger. Another question is, what are the libraries from where one can get data about the use of AI in disaster for disasters? And my recommendation there is there are going to be a ton of resources that come in this presentation series. So I really encourage you to engage in those. And I think they will provide a lot of information about what are libraries out there that are really capable. Some of the libraries that I think about are things that center around talking directly to the LLMs, so you can use the LLMs directly through API calls. And the other thing is you can use libraries like Hugging Faces to use to do data analytics. And so another question is, let's see. In the absence of data about particular weather events, how can AI play its role in early warning? I think this is a great question, a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but in the absence of data, AI is actually pretty good at trying to fill in data that is missing. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, and it's just trying to guess from similar situations, or maybe from similar areas with similar weather patterns, what kind of disasters might occur there, what kind of flooding might occur there, what kind of food distribution you might need. So anyway, lots of really great questions, and I'm excited about all of you engaging with artificial intelligence to try to use it to solve your problem. The stuff that all of you are doing is incredibly important, and I wish you the best of luck in solving all those problems. And I know that the rest of this series will go a long way toward helping you understand that. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Now it's back to UNDRR, and we have planned to run a quiz in Slido. So those of you who have followed the webinars with UNDRR GETI before, you may have already downloaded the Slido app, but if you haven't, this is a good time to do so. So I'm going to share my screen in a moment. I hope that you are now able to see my screen. Where we're going to run a Slido quiz with just 5 simple questions to recap the main takeaways from Jeff's excellent presentation. You can join this quiz either by going through your browser at slido.com, or you can use the Slido app, and then you enter this code, and I can see already a number of people are joining, and that is great. So we'll wait a few seconds to let more people join the quiz. Those of you who have participated before in Slido quizzes like this, you will know that in order to get the maximum amount of points, you need to answer correctly and also quickly. If you answer correct more quickly, you get more points in the end. And through this quiz, we are going to run 5 questions that Jeff has prepared, and all of them are of the type true or false. So you'll see 5 statements on your screen, and then you will be able to select true or false, depending on what you remember from Jeff's presentation. I see that there's still people joining, so we'll wait a few more seconds before we start. Okay, so I'll start with the first question, and it will still be possible for latecomers to join while the quiz is running as well. So we'll go ahead and start with question number 1. True or false? Most of the AI in use today is artificial general intelligence, meaning it can match or exceed the capabilities of humans on almost any task. True or false? Okay, so there your answers broke down fairly even between true and false. The correct answer was false. Modern AI is narrow, limited to a few specific tasks. We'll move on to question number 2. True or false? The quality of the data used to train an AI system is directly linked to the quality and reliability of its outputs. True or false? Most of you answered true, and that was indeed correct. AI learns from data, so high quality relevant data is essential for building accurate and effective models. Number 3, true or false? The AI technology best suited for analyzing social media text to categorize requests for help is called computer vision. True or false? Yeah, there your answers broke down quite even as well. The correct answer was false. You may have heard Jeff say that analyzing language would be better served by natural language processing, and that computer vision may help analyze images and videos in posts. Number 4, true or false? The primary goal of implementing AI in an organization should be to replace human decision making completely. So most of you said false. And that's indeed the correct answer. AI should be used to augment, but not replace human intelligence. Then the final one, true or false? A significant risk of AI is that its decisions may be based on flawed or biased training data. True or false? Yeah, most people answered true, and that was the correct answer as well. So that ends the quiz, and congratulations to everybody who participated, including Renaud Burke, who answered all 5 questions correctly in the shortest amount of time. So that completes our quiz for this first session. Sanjaya and Jeff, if you are both still online, I just want to check if you'd like to come in and say something before we end this session.
Jeff, would you like to answer a couple of questions? There is still time. Or I can pick a couple if you like.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer a few questions. So let's see. If you want to pick some, I can try to answer them.
I mean, there is one on in communities where early warning systems are weak or non-existent. Can AI help local responders make faster, life-saving decisions, especially when internet access is unreliable?
Yeah, so that is without internet access, it is challenging. You can run these models locally. So if you have local compute capabilities, you can train and move models to run locally for decision makers, even without internet access. Yeah, somebody said edge AI, exactly.
Okay, and let me see. Could you highlight some critical points? For example, the importance of training data, garbage in, garbage out, AI making up things like scientific references, and AI's tendencies to agree with the users and trying to please them.
Yeah, so this the sort of going backwards. AI trying to please the user is a problem. You can try to give it in that long-term memory. You can try to tell it that you don't want it to try to be super nice to you or compliment everything that you say. On the sort of garbage in, garbage out, that is absolutely true. These AI companies are in a difficult position in that for the model to be better, they need lots of data, but it's really hard to get high quality data. And so all of them are desperately trying to figure out, how do they get high quality data and still get enough data? And, the harder you make it for data to be accepted as part of training, the less data you're going to have. And so, the AI companies are trying to strike that balance. Some of them do better than others. I highly recommend that, depending on your specific problem, that you look at the different models. I use some models for some tasks and other models for other tasks. So, like for programming, I like Claude. But for other tasks, I may use ChatGPT or something like that. So explore the range of models. Don't just stick to one, because they may have better data on some things. And also, you can provide your own data to the system to try to influence its answers.
Thank you. There's another question on, can you give some example of emergency management approaches in the United States which are using AI?
I am not, that is outside my area of expertise. I'm just a computer scientist, so I'm gonna have to say I don't know. It's a great question, but I don't know enough to give a good answer to that.
Okay, there's another one. How to mitigate the data biases? Should we upscale or downscale?
There are tons of techniques for mitigating biases. So once there are really two stages, one is understanding what are the biases of the data. And there's some great techniques that are out there for understanding data biases and testing those. And then once you understand the kinds of bias that are in the data, you might either inject data that sort of pushes, that sort of offsets that bias and retrain. Or if it's a model that already exists, there are post-answer bias mitigation techniques that you can apply. And there are a ton of techniques. It kind of depends on the situation. And really, I would use AI to ask AI about how to do bias mitigation. Those systems are aware of these problems, and they can really give you some great conversations about fixing them.
Okay, that's a good tip. So there's another question about which data progressing softwares can you suggest for a data set of plus 10,000 climate solutions? That's a big data set.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the data. Microsoft has some good products for data set processing. Most of the cloud providers have some good data cleaning sets that identify things like duplicates, that identify things like missing data, and then they will have solutions for what to do about the missing data, right? Do you eliminate the entry altogether? Some of them have, missing data approximation fill-ins. So the Microsoft products are particularly good, but there are tons of others that are out there. I would really look at your cloud provider if you're doing AI in cloud, and they all have their own sort of packaged data cleaning tools.
There's also a question about how to remove, if one has been using AI, how to remove personal data. How does that happen?
That is going to be up. Unfortunately, that is going to be up to the individual company. There are, rights that you have in certain parts of the world, especially like in the EU, where you might be able to compel the companies to, the sort of right to be forgotten and compel the companies to remove the data. But it really just depends on your region. And the only entity that can remove that data and control what's done with it is the company themselves. So either they are controlled by law or by agreement, or they just have to be nice and remove the data on request.
Okay. So you were talking about hallucinations and making up, outputs. And so somebody has asked, what if this is applied, AI is applied to improve early warning systems, for example, and then it hallucinates and gives a wrong early warning? Is that possible, and how to avoid that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. And there are sort of two ways to deal with that. One is typically on these AI systems, they have what's called temperature, and you can turn up or down the temperature. If you turn the temperature way down on some of these tools, and that's actually an AI term, it will reduce hallucination. It will also reduce creativity. So sometimes what you're seeing is not a hallucination. It's creativity. It's a new story. It's a new whatever. So one thing I would look at is controlling the temperature. And then the other thing is putting in guardrails. Always at the end, you want guardrails that you implement that put constraints on what can be answered. So those guardrails might take references that are generated and go look them up in like a library search site. And if it can't find that reference, it'll delete it from the response before you see the response. So those are two techniques I might use.
Thank you, Jeff. I think we're now done with the time. So thank you very much for you and your team to join and deliver this first masterclass. And to all the participants, we will share all the material with you. Some questions were asked about attendance. It is the email with which you log in. So please use the same email next time, because that email is being tracked. And that's being tracked automatically by the system. So do that. And then I think with this, we end today's session and look forward to the next session.